The Attack on Pearl Harbor by Fonseca. The attack on Pearl Harbor occurred on December 7, 1941, in Oahu, which is territory of Hawaii. The attack was fought between America and Japan. The background. The attack was preceded by months of negotiations with the Americans and Japanese over the future plans of the Pacific. Japan demanded that the U.S. end its sanctions against them, a stop to aiding China, and allow the Japanese to have access to the Dutch East India resources. Japan, knowing the U.S. would respond negatively, delivered its naval attack squads in November of 1941, right before the U.S. demanded Japan to withdraw from China and French Indochina. Japan's aim was to prevent the U.S. Pacific Fleet, which were the U.S. units, from entering with its planned military actions in Southeast Asia against territories of the U.S., UK, and the Netherlands. Over the span of 7 hours, there were Japanese attacks on U.S.-held cities and countries. Next, the major figures. The individuals who were key in the attack on the side of the U.S. were husband Edward Kimmel, who was United States Navy four-star admiral, who was the commander-in-chief of the United States Pacific Fleet during the attack. He was removed from the command after the attack due to his lack of preparedness and intelligence failures leading up to it. After the attack, he was relieved of his command and later faced a naval inquiry to investigate his role in the events. Then was Kimmel's counterpart, Walter Campbell Short, who was a lieutenant general, temporary ranked, and major general of the United States Army, and the U.S. military commander, who was responsible for the defense of U.S. military installations in Hawaii at the time of the attack. He also was neglectful in his performance of duties. Next, for the key figures for the Japanese were Isoroku Yamamoto, who was a Japanese naval officer and the commander-in-chief of the combined fleet during World War II. He was the main figure in the attack on Pearl Harbor because he was the one who came up with the plan and executed it. Then, Chuichi Nagumo, who was a Japanese admiral during World War II. He commanded the aircraft carriers that led the attack on Pearl Harbor under the overall command of Isoroku Yamamoto. Nagumo's role was crucial in planning and executing the surprise attack on the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Next, the units that were involved. The units that were involved were the U.S. Pacific Fleet and the Japan First Air Fleet. These units contain the strength of the U.S. and Japan. Firstly, the strengths of the U.S. The U.S. had a fleet of 8 battleships, 8 cruisers, 30 destroyers, 4 submarines, and also 73 other ships and 390 aircraft. Then, with the Japanese, they contained a fleet of 6 aircraft carriers, 2 heavy cruisers, 1 light cruiser, 23 fleet submarines, 5 midget submarines, 414 aircrafts, and much more. This brings up the unique features of the attack. One of them was the surprise element. The Japanese launched the attack without any warning, catching the Americans off guard. Another unique feature was the use of aircraft carriers. The Japanese used their aircraft carriers to launch the attack, which was a new and innovative attack tactic at the time. The attack also focused primarily on the American naval fleet, causing significant damage to the battleships and other vessels. Now the attack itself. The attack was led by Yamamoto. It commenced at 7:48 in the morning. The base was attacked by the Japanese strengths. Yamamoto's plan was to strike the base in 2 waves. Their aim was to destroy the important U.S. units, which would prevent the U.S. Pacific Fleet from interfering with Japan and its plans to conquer Southeast Asia. But their main goal was that doing the attack would undermine the U.S. morale, so they would drop the demands of the Japanese and seek peace. The first wave was the main attack, and the second wave was to attack carriers first, cruisers second, and battleships third, in which they carried out the attack. Next, maps of battles and movements of the troops. For the attack they targeted specific areas. These maps display Japan's movement The map on the left shows the first and second wave hit points, and the map on the right shows the track of the carrier task force. Next, the unique features of the war. These included that the attack on Pearl Harbor was the first time in history that aircraft carriers were used as the primary striking force in a major naval battle. The Japanese utilized their carriers to launch waves of planes, which proved to be a devastating and unexpected tactic. And secondly was the element of surprise. The Japanese intentionally planned the attack to catch the US specifically off guard, launching a surprise aerial assault early in the morning. Interesting anecdotes. There were a few interesting anecdotes from the attack on Pearl Harbor. One of them involves a Japanese pilot named Shiraganoru Nishikaichi. After his plane was damaged during the attack, he crash landed on the island of Niihau, which was inhabited by Japanese immigrants. The local residents initially helped him, but when they discovered he was an enemy pilot, they overpowered him and captured him. Next, the aftermath and casualties for the US. 90 minutes after it began, the attack was over. For the US, 2,008 sailors were killed and 710 others wounded. 218 soldiers and airmen, who were part of the Army prior to the independent United States Air Force in 1947, were killed and 364 wounded. 109 Marines were killed and 69 wounded, and 68 civilians were killed and 35 wounded. In total, 2,403 Americans were killed and 1,178 were wounded. 18 ships were sunk or run aground, including 5 battleships. All of the Americans killed or wounded during the attack were legally non-combatants, given that there was no state of war when the attack occurred. Next, the aftermath and casualties for Japan. 55 Japanese airmen and 9 submarines were killed in the attack. Of Japanese 414 available planes, 350 took part in the raid. 29 were lost, 9 in the first wave, 3 fighters, 1 dive bomber, and 5 torpedo bombers, and 20 in the second, 6 fighters, and 14 dive bombers, with another 74 damaged by anti-aircraft fire from the ground. And finally, the significance of the attack to the outcome of the war. The attack on Pearl Harbor had a significant impact on the outcome of World War II. It propelled the United States into the war, led by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, as it promoted them to officially enter the conflict. This marked a turning point as the U.S. became a major country in the fight against the Axis power. The end.